Welcome back to the One Handshake Podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Vorce. Today's guest is someone many people know of, but fewer have had the chance to really connect with. I'm excited for this conversation and the fireside chat we're going to have afterward. So, years ago, I was in that category of knowing of him, but I wanted to see for myself who and how he actually was in real life, like away from the screen. So I attended an event in Boston where I knew he would be speaking. I think it was like circa 2010 or something like that. And I have the mugshot slash photo to prove it. Very snazzy. So little hold that for ransom for later. But let me tell you a bit more about him, even though I know he'd rather us start with lasers like the Star Wars type. But I want you to know who he is. So a very quick bio. Chris Brogan shaped how people think about trust, influence, and relationships long before creator culture or personal branding had a name. He's the author of more than a dozen books, including a New York Times bestseller. He's one of the first bloggers and has delivered over 1,000 keynotes around the world. Like, impressive. More recently, he served as a strategic advisor to CEOs and leadership teams, helping one company scale from 10 million to nearly 300 million ARR. He spans creator to corporate, public voice to behind the scenes counsel. But Chris is not defined by titles alone, which is why he's on our show. He's also a dad, a lifelong fan of superheroes, as you can see by his background if you're watching this on video, and an avid photographer who uses the camera as a way to slow down, notice, and stay grounded. But perhaps what most resonates with One Handshake is that throughout his career, relationships have been the constant, not as transactions, but as long-term human investments that compound over time. Without further ado, welcome to One Handshake, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jillian. And sorry to throw chaos right out of our conversation, right out of the gate. I will never be able to live up to that intro. So hopefully we'll work our way backwards into who I really am, I guess. But thank you, very kind intro.
Yeah, I think it's live up to. I think it is actually a compilation of some of the lily pads that you've hopped on along the way. I mean, none of it was
I'm very
fabricated.
lucky.
Yeah.
Now, no, I mean those are all real things.
Yeah.
When my highlight reel when I die is going to be great. I'll be ready for it. But I think that you said it. The one untying thing is that relationship has always mattered all the way through. I sometimes do it well. I sometimes do it poorly. I'm trying to point out, like, even though relationship matters a great deal to me, it doesn't mean I'm great at it. It means
Mm,
that it's the thing I like to focus on. So
mhm.
there's a lot of people who like to sing who shouldn't. I really love relationships.
Hmm. 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 So, yeah, so there's so many ways we could go with this, but let's follow that thread instead of my notes. Let's follow your thread for a change, huh? Color outside of the lines, if you will. So specifically with relationships, wow, I have so many questions about that. But let's go this way. Let's wrap the relationship piece to your what I believe you once referred to as becoming the 12-year overnight success, right? Maybe it's yeah. So I don't know if you still kind of utilize that phrase or if it's been kind of reformatted or what. But I'm curious. Basically, taking a step back, how has how what role have relationships played, or how has your um, kind of connection to them evolved over the years?
You know, there's a saying: if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
Relationship is my nail. I content that I make, I always think, what will this do for the person? Like, I never, ever, 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 ever create content in any form, books, text, a photo, making videos, my YouTube channels, and none of it is ever, I hope people really like looking at me. I'm only ever thinking, I wonder if someone out there will go, oh, I can resonate with that, or oh, that makes me feel less alone.
Mhm,
And I think that was the whole point of the overnight success, is that
mhm,
it's sort of well trodden now that, you know, these things don't happen in a vacuum. There's all these like platitudes we throw at people and say takes a while. But in the early days of all this kind of influencery social media, now everyone can sort of watch through the glasses we work. There were a lot of people that you and I were peers with who
Mhm.
didn't ever show a bump, never showed any kind of falls, never showed any kind of thing that went wrong. And so I committed early to I will show you every mistake I make. I will get almost a little too candid with my mistakes so that I scare people sometimes. And then I also, like early on, I just explained to the world that I also deal with clinical depression and I do these things. I was trying to make sure that everyone could feel that they had permission to get there and that there was no super fast timetable usually.
Hmm. Hmm. So I like that. And it makes me think of this kind of juxtaposition that I'm often thinking about and talking about, which is like strategy and authenticity. Right? And I think, there's the whole bit about being mutually exclusive, et cetera. And I think strategy and authenticity directly correlate to relationships and this idea of, having strategic relationships and also having authentic relationships. And I think it also applies to kind of content creation, if you will, right? So this idea of knowing all the algorithms and which platform is best and your ICP and all of these things, and then the kind of more authentic, it's just wanting to express ourselves or share something or put something out there that we feel is good work. So I'm curious, and it's kind of a loaded question, so I'll just drop it into your hands and let you have do with it. But talk a little bit about this is overlap or this eclipse of strategy and authenticity, either through relationships, content, or maybe a third medium.
There is no more swear wordy word to me than authenticity. I
Mm.
have always had a very strong negative reaction to the word because often when people are discussing this, they're talking about generating it or manufacturing it. And so it's like sort of planned improv. Like it's a thing that can't be.
Yeah.
So it, it's the very nature of improv.
Yeah.
So the the thing with the authentic, I mean, I understand what people react to, especially with me. I mean, I'm like a weird bag of potatoes, no matter what. Everywhere I go, there's an element of chaos. There's kind of a shambles. I showed up in front of a place to give a professional speech and realized that I didn't understand my people that I was going to speak for. I thought they were X, but they were Y, and I had to relaunch the speech right on the stage. Had I not spoken a lot of times, that would have been an absolute failure
Mm.
because I am very skilled in that particular thing.
Mhm.
That wasn't so hard. But the difference and the authenticity part is that I call it out. Like that's the to me the difference is what I my working theory, and I don't always know that it's right.
Mm.
My working theory is that if I just tell you I made a mistake or I didn't do the thing or I fell down or something, I find that you respond usually better because you understand. You're like, well, that's a real person.
Mhm.
Um, I always also had because of this weird version of internet fame, I always wanted to be absolutely the same, whether we were in like a restroom
Mhm.
or on stage or somewhere at like a table with just 10 people.
Mhm.
And I think that there's a lot of people who it's hard for them to be their real self
Mhm.
in circumstances. And so the closest I'll get to your concept of strategic authenticity
Mm.
is that yes, it is an active strategy that I am absolutely who I am as often as I can be,
Mhm.
with just kind of like you want to trim some of the edges. You want to try not to bring all your garbage. You want to leave a window to the fact that you are not whole and perfect. And it turns certain people up. My gosh, I've met some of the greatest like sales guru types of the world. They all to a one appreciate that I'm a weirdo, mostly hate me, and mostly like don't know what to do with me and kind of wander off dazed.
Mhm.
I think that on the other side, the non-sales people of the universe don't like that I have a business interest and a business acumen And so I've made a life out of not fitting fully,
Mm.
but still just trying to interface. So authenticity, I think the act of being who you are in a useful and appropriate way is very important. I think that trying to manufacture is
Yeah.
risky.
Yeah, manufacturing authenticity is, it doesn't math. Yeah, yeah. So I want to just quickly underscore that, as you know, it's like there's no shortage of gurus out there and all the internet famous people and whatnot. And so, just like I mentioned earlier, I of course learned who you were in I don't know, like 2009 or 10 with the Gary V and all the people. So I am one of like the super nerds. I like to observe people kind of in their natural habitat or when they're out to just get a sense of who they are and yeah, their authenticity score, if you will, just based on my gut reaction instinct. I have really pretty strong instincts about people. And so that's one of the things that has stood out to me about you over the years is exactly what you said. And I distinctly remember a conversation we had out in San Diego, I think, at a table. We are just connecting and talking about mental health and sexuality and gender issues and all of the things. And it was like we had been pals forever because we had, but in a different context. But I really appreciated that. And so I would speak to that. And for me, that makes me think of this idea of not necessarily strategic authenticity, but like those two lanes and how to navigate each one. It's like, it's like the gas and the clutch. Like, how are you handling those two? Because, in the strategic world, like I remember being at a conference, the Massachusetts Women's Conference, or Conference for Women, whatever. And there was a woman there that I knew of, and I went to say hello to her. And she essentially looked right through me, past me, around me, all of the things, because she had a preconceived notion about who I was. And then the next time I saw her, when I was with people that she deemed to be like high status people, suddenly she wanted to be my friend. So for me, that's like the far extreme of like hyper strategic. But for me, I deduced a certain authenticity score there. So I filed that away and now I remember. So I think there's a sense, especially if you want to, develop in the corporate world or become known in a particular industry, there's a component of strategy that's needed. But I think learning or being able to do that in such a way as to not erode our authenticity and not to diminish or overlook or look through people, which is why we talk a lot about, behind the label or behind the title, who is the person and why you being a dad and a photographer is just as important to me, and I would say One Handshake folk, as to you doing 1,000 global keynotes and New York Times bestseller and, having, whatever it is, 300,000 plus followers on formerly known as Twitter. Like all of these things, to me, it's the composition of the whole person that resonates, and I think that is who you are, in case you're wondering.
Thank you. So many things from that. One is I've had I immediately thought of someone when you talked about someone the status type person.
Mhm.
I had the weirdest, when you speak, and I'm not out super active on the road anymore. I would love to be, but I haven't been of late. When you speak a lot, you tend to bump into certain people because
Mhm.
your topics show up or whatever.
Sure.
And I had this little run where 3 times in a row I spoke at the same place where Ariana Huffington spoke.
Mhm.
And, she introduced herself to me the first time, and I said, "Hi, I'm Chris," whatever, I don't know, I said it did none of it mattered, I was just talking to her. And I met her again about a week later, and she introduced herself again, and I said, "We just met a week ago?" And then I met her another week later, and she introduced herself again, and I said, "I must be so forgettable." I
Mm.
said, because that was 3 in a row. Like, 2, okay, maybe
Mm.
she's bad with faces, but, so that's how I feel about that. When, I just recently got out of an executive gig at a corporation, a software company, and, you have to be a grown up at a company like this, and our board meetings, I was the right hand to the CEO, so I'm at every board meeting, I put together the board materials, and my CEO and founder was the only person who he just believed in me all dimensions, like, we'd worked together since the '90s in different businesses, and
Mhm.
he and I were like this, but that was not the rest of the entire executive team. That was not the rest of the board. And so I would have moments in meetings where like I would say, well, we're having a problem here. And I think that's really just because this person's a poopy face. And all the faces in the room would like look at me like, did you really just say poopy face? And I said, well, yeah, because I'm not supposed to curse as much anymore. We should call him jerkhead or something, whatever words you guys want to use. But these are like grown-ups. This one guy at this meeting is this like he wears $700 shoes without socks, and so he throws them out like once or every couple months. $700 shoes. So me calling a guy poopy face to in his presence made me so happy. So I I think what I'm trying to model, if I am trying to model anything there, is you can really be you in a lot of configurations. And when you and I talked about things like mental health, sexuality,
Mhm.
all those kinds of things, gender issues, all these changes that the world's going through, it's because I want more people to know that doesn't always get you fired. That there are ways that you can interact and be that you are,
Mhm.
uh, and find a company that fits that well, or find colleagues that fit that well, or find buyers who fit that well. And that's been kind of my mission the last little while.
Mhm. Mhm. So can I go back to something you mentioned earlier? It's still kind of has its hand up for me to pick, choose it. So you mentioned earlier that you feel like you've been lucky. Um, Tell me about that. And like, what was the catalyst? Like, do you remember like you just started doing your thing and then 12 years later you were famous Chris Brogan? Like, we talk a little bit about that and, and perhaps your book with Julian is a part of that story or maybe not.
There's so much. So 1998, I started journaling back when they called blogging when they called it journal.
Mm.
And I was like, this is fun. And I did it because I was born and raised in Maine, and there were three conversations growing up. It was Van Halen versus Led Zeppelin. It was Mustang versus Camaro. And
Yeah.
would the Red Sox ever win a World Series?
Yeah.
And I didn't know much about sports ball, so I kind of didn't care, but I wanted them to win because of my parents and grandparents. Van Halen was my answer, and Camaro was my answer. And then I thought, oh, there goes all the conversations. And I really wanted to talk to people about really important things like Superman versus Hulk,
Yeah.
why Star Trek is way better than Star Wars, even though Star Trek is cooler than Star Wars. Very important conversations, Julian. And I couldn't have them in Augusta, Maine,
Mm.
because no one around me wanted to have those talks. So I was born for social media. There's a reason Facebook was founded in Massachusetts. There's a reason MySpace, HubSpot, all these things. A great deal of this technology was here in cold climes because we would freeze to death trying to walk and talk to our people. I brought that forward through blogging. I was one of the early YouTube people. I had an account at 2005, which I squandered and never got more than 5,000 subs. I was user 10,202 on Twitter. I left when X came. I
Yeah.
deleted my account. Um, so I believed all along that these social tools had a value that we could connect with people and be right connected to them. And the book Trust Agents came from a conversation. I was at South by Southwest. It was 2008, and I was sitting next to a very wonderful woman, Ellen. And she asked me, she goes, "Do you read?" I said, "I read all the time." She goes, "Where would this book be?" And she explained this book. And I said, "Well, at Barnes and Noble, it would be on this part of the store,
Mhm.
but at Borders, they would have it in this section." And she
Orders.
looked sideways at me and said, "Why don't you have a book?" And I said, "Seems like a lot of work."
Mm.
Now, since age 5, I wanted to be an author. I always told people I wanted to be an author. What
Mhm.
I didn't like to do is write. So especially when I started blogging because I submitted stuff to literary journals and they were all like, "You suck." So I just thought maybe I'll just blog and I'll be the Chris Brogan. So I started becoming the Chris Brogan like through that whole story arc. 2005-ish. When I got the book deal, I called Julian Smith and said, "Hey, you want to write a book?" And he goes, "Okay." And that was literally the conversation. I said, "I'll just give you half." He said, "Okay." So we wrote together. And then ever since, you know, before that, 2005 into 2006, I started getting some connection. 2007 and 2008, I start getting more speeches. Guy Kawasaki says famously to the people when Thomson and Reuters were going to merge, he said, you should get this Brogan guy. He's good. And Guy told me at that same place where I got the trust agent deal that's out by, he said in the same hallway down the way, you should ask those people for a lot of money for your speech. And I said, Guy, I don't even know what a lot of money is. I said, I asked $2,500. He goes, ask for 25,000. Oh, so I did. I asked that question on a phone call with a lot of people. There's like 75 people, I mean, and I said 25,000, like I had said that many times. Yeah. Correct. And then I pushed the mute button and they said, would you take 20? And I said, yes. They didn't even finish the 20 out of the 20. And I said, yes, because I'm not cool. Like I figured like, I better say yes real quick because I don't want to like lose this. And that was when I first started getting real things. So all these things coalesced to make me me. But prior to that, I just didn't have a whole lot of external proof or validation that I had something interesting to say. And this is important for anybody. Two things make that better. One is the relationship stuff, which is the whole reason of One Handshake. It's the reason you've arrived the way you have is you just know and have connected with lots of people. I wouldn't have done any of this if I didn't have that. The other thing was, because I co-founded an event called PodCamp at 05. Everyone loved the event. 06, I'm sorry. Everyone loved it. Everyone talked about it. It put me on a different stage. The other thing was that success begets success. So all you need is a small win, and then you get another win, and then you get another win. And then it goes crazy, and then you fail, and then you think, oh no, and then you have to try to recreate what you did.
Hmm. So I want to just tell you one quick thing. I've been an avid podcast listener for many years. And I was on my way to New York years ago when I lived in Boston, listening to a podcast. And I always take notes. I'm that kind of nerd. So I listen to a podcast and, and take notes on my phone. And there was one quote that you said, and I can't remember which podcast you're on, but in any case, I remember you saying that I believe it was with Trust Insights, I believe, that was your first book or first big book, the first big one.
Trust agents.
I
Yep.
mean, Trust
Trust
Agents, yeah,
agents.
Impact Equation, Trust Agents, yeah. I'm pretty sure you said that when that book came out in like the couple years to follow, that you made like 30,000 from the sale of the book, but over $1 million from speaking about the book.
That's right.
I have shared that with so many people over the years and how, these little things that we say it on a podcast or a video or on a stage somewhere, they can continue to live. Just like we were talking before we started about the artwork behind you and how there's something to be said for sharing things and then resharing things and how it can really influence a lot of other people. And so just wanted to comment that I heard that many years ago and it's kind of stayed with me. So, um, okay, so clearly I could ask you questions all day and I would love to be able to continue, but it's about the witching hour. So as we wrap up,
Yeah.
where should people go to learn more about you and your work?
I don't even know anymore. I re-turned on chrisbrogan.com, but it's just sitting there. It's just a shell. I did it because I thought maybe you used it. LinkedIn, I guess. LinkedIn.com/ I think it's C Brogan. I don't know. Look for this furry Santa Claus looking man and, connect them. I might not connect with you, but at least we'll figure each other out.
Yeah.
Oh, and I have one of those Substack things all the weirdos do these days, I guess.
Substack. We also have the Backpack Show on YouTube, which is
Yes, every Friday.
yes.
YouTube.com/Chris Brogan.
Yeah.
And I have photography as meditation because in case one YouTube channel isn't enough, I have youtube.com/@Chris Brogan photos. There you go. I think that's all of it.
Perfect. So we got some links. So Chris, I really want to sincerely thank you for your time and candor and being here today. And also, just for the record, you were one of the first people to write a review, a testimonial for my book when it came out 10 years ago, 2020 Mindsight. And I always, always appreciate you for that so much. And continuing to be.
Well deserved. It was a swell book that people needed.
Yeah, I really, really
I'm
appreciate it. Yeah.
So I'm so sorry I have to boot.
Yeah.
I will come back and hang out with your chatters. Thank you, Jillian.
All right. Thank you. Cheers. So if this conversation resonated with you, or you'd like to join a future private fireside chat with a One Handshake guest, you should check out the community at onehandshake.co. And with that, thanks for listening. Cheers.